I think this one is a topic that's close to your heart and crucial for understanding how comics reach different audiences. Let's talk about dyslexia, neurodivergence, and how Batman comics specifically can be both a challenge and a gift for neurodivergent readers.
Well, I would have to say, when I'm working with dyslexic students, we've moved away from comics and more about the graphic novels,
Hmm.
just because the writing tends to be more sophisticated. And a number of my students, what you find when you're dealing with neurodiverse students is that I first of all want to explain to you what it is. This is the top book in my field called Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. And just so you know what the problem is, that's dyslexia.
Oh.
Do you see how the back part of your brain has this massive neuroactivity?
Yeah.
But the back part of mine has next to nothing?
Mm-hmm.
But the front part of my brain's about 2.5 times overactive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So what we simply have to do to work with these kids is to move it from the back part of the brain to the front part.
Well,
That deals with two things called word analysis followed by articulation. But the first thing that everybody needs to understand about these kids is that we have to focus on their speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. And a lot of these kids are really into comics.
oh, yeah.
And
Stand back. It's bullet time. Howdy, true believers, and welcome back to a very special holiday edition of Bullet Time Bites, where we break down the greatest moments and movements in nerd culture. Bites. I'm your host with the most and your forever guardian, Dynamo, and I'm joined by my co-host Alex, and today we're continuing our Batman deep dive with part 2 for this holiday season. So give the folks a shout, Alex.
Hey everyone, great to be back, and thanks for having me back, Dynamo.
Of course. Well, I mean, you're my co-host. But joining us today, we have our accessibility expert in dyslexia and all sorts. As here we have Russel Van Brocklen.
thanks for having me.
Of course. And showing up a bit late, but he should be here. We also have our usual guest, Joe. So let's dive into our episode. Last episode, we traced Batman from Detective Comics number 27 through the Dark Knight trilogy. Today, we're tackling the post-Nolan era, but with some special holiday ingredients. We're exploring Batman's horror DNA, discussing neurodivergent representation in comics, and examining how the Dark Knight has evolved since Christopher Nolan hung up his director's chair. And yes, before you ask, Batman absolutely counts as a festive character to do during the Christmas season. After all, Batman Returns is a Christmas movie. So, today's festive mission, understanding Batman's journey after Nolan, examining his gothic horror roots, and exploring how comics can be more accessible for neurodivergent readers, and debating whether we finally found the definitive Dark Knight, or if that's even the point. So, let's unwrap this episode. Alex, before we dive into the post-Nolan films, let's talk about something fundamental. Batman has always been a horror character dressed up as a superhero. What makes Batman uniquely suited to horror storytelling?
Well, for one thing, as we know, at least for the concept idea of Batman, whilst there are various angles that are taken for why Bruce Wayne came up with a conceptual idea of him dressing up as a bat, essentially to fight crime, the main important thing related to that is that the bat's meant to be a symbol of striking fear into the crime world. It's kind of like as a secondary thought to not do something lest you face Batman head on. But I think it kind of has to do with the idea of a specific fear itself, like the fear of bats, but I think it's also more the idea that the very dark figure in the shadows staring at you, not being able to be seen easily, and then swooping out and essentially taking you down, just giving you that sheer panic of it happening out of nowhere before realizing that this isn't just a man you're fighting. This is Batman. This is the guy who's allegedly the world's greatest detective. The guy who's basically always there to keep Gotham safe and is putting down all various forms of crime fighters down in one way or another. And no one knows who he is. It's just the Batman. Well, that's all you see before you realise that he's there. And I guess also the way he handles the takedowns as well, especially in other medias like video games. He seems to operate instead of a direct approach in most cases. It's always much more subtle, like attacking from the shadows, and if anything, that's more terrifying than knowing what's right in front of you because you don't know where he's coming from. He blends in with the shadows, and next thing you know, you're hung upside down from the top of the biggest building in Gotham.
True. And I think we've also got some characters from Batman who have been used to explore the horror aspect of Batman. A couple of the characters that we mentioned last episode that I think we'll bring up a bit here was, for example, Scarecrow, the Master of Fear. And apparently his creation drew from Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And apparently the character shares the surname that goes his hero. And fear toxin victims become totally beside themselves, which is basically psychological horror. So I find that very interesting. And I think we definitely have some amazing aspects of Batman operating as a horror figure. As well as we've also got our other sides to Batman as well. We have him showing his empathy, showing the kindness, and trying to just prevent people experiencing the same psychological horror that he's been through. But Joe, welcome.
All right. Sorry I'm late, but we're here. So go on. Give me a rundown of what's been discussed so far.
No worries. We're just discussing how we're tackling this episode and that we're looking at everything post the Dark Knight trilogy. So we've had just right now our period of Batman and his horror aspect. So Joe, I'll give you the floor here a bit. So we mentioned how Batman is designed to be nightmare fuel to his enemies, where the best example is his first night out in Batman Begins, where he systematically terrorizes criminals. So how do you think the horror elements have evolved from Burton to Nolan to now Reeves?
Well, different. I feel like with the Tim Burton era, it just felt, in a way, it felt, obviously it was darker than, obviously the Adam West Batmans and things like that. But it still had comical aspects about it. And Dark Knight just took darkness to another level, and that was more, in those, it felt like a horror movie you're waiting for a jump scare, especially when he first appeared and took down Falcone.
Yeah.
But then in the Pattinson Batmans, I just felt, he was just more, he's in the darkness, he's waiting there. Then he seemed showing up in this massive suit, looked like a transformer. And then, so it didn't have the, but whilst still like it did have horror aspects, you're thinking, where is he? When's he gonna show? It didn't exactly jump out at you like the Dark Knight did. You could hear him slowly coming.
Yeah.
So,
we definitely have the evolution across that time, and you're right, it does feel different from each period. But now let's jump onto our next topic. Russell, I think this one is a topic that's close to your heart and crucial for understanding how comics reach different audiences. Let's talk about dyslexia, neurodivergence, and how Batman comics specifically can be both a challenge and a gift for neurodivergent readers.
Well, I would have to say, when I'm working with dyslexic students, we've moved away from comics and more about the graphic novels, just because the writing tends to be more sophisticated. And a number of my students, what you find when you're dealing with neurodiverse students is that I first of all want to explain to you what it is. This is the top book in my field called Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. And just so you know what the problem is, that's dyslexia.
Oh,
Do you see how the back part of your brain has this massive neural activity?
yeah.
But the back part of mine has next to nothing?
Mhm.
But the front part of my brain's about 2.5 times overactive?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So what we simply have to do to work with these kids is to move it from the back part of the brain to the front part.
Oh,
That deals with two things called word analysis followed by articulation. But the first thing that everybody needs to understand about these kids is that we have to focus in their speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. And a lot of these kids are really into comics.
oh yeah.
And this isn't, and if you look at characters like Batman, they're extremely sophisticated. This is not something for your average 10-year-old kid. This is something you can go really deep in. So I tend to move more towards the graphic novels. And with that, we have to find out really what the kid is really interested in regards to Batman, what really makes it interesting. And from there, the next thing that we have to do is not ask the dyslexic kid some big question and then try to eventually go down into the details. You can't do that because if you ask a dyslexic kid in their speciality what they're really interested in, they're going to tell you that they have ideas flying around their head at light speed, but with little to no organization. So essentially that front part of the brain that's 2.5 times overactive, there's no organization there. So what you have to do is ask a very specific point and then go out from there.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about Batman, you have to ask them, go through the graphic novel. What specific point interests you the most? And once you find that, then you have to ask the kid, then we have to connect it with word analysis followed by articulation. What you do is you ask them, what is it that Batman wants to do? What is he really trying to accomplish here?
Yeah.
What part of him are you really the most interested in? Then you write that out, a couple of sentences. You find the best, most important word. And that's what I call our base universal theme. It gives you an idea to get started with, but it's generally so broad. You then have to put it into the thesaurus, find 5 or 10 synonyms that you're really interested in that represent that initial universal theme, and then find the one, type out the word, type out the definition from Oxford English or Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and find the definition that best matches what's in your head. That's your base that's your final universal theme. Then you got to pick out the optimum villain who's going to try to prevent Batman from accomplishing his goal in that very specific area. That could be a person or a concept. You find that out, then put that into a basic sentence, go because, and then come up with 3 good reasons. And those reasons, that's the articulation. Now the dyslexic kid can start discussing it intelligently. But that's the secret of how to use graphic novels to have kids have a really good conversation about comic book characters.
No, that is actually really interesting, and I feel that we have had representations of the characters with these volumes. Where we've had a recent character in Cassandra Cain showing neurodivergence. We've also got apparently the new Batman now, Robert Pattinson's Batman, apparently neurodivergent and on the spectrum. So I think movies nowadays are trying to make it connect with these kids now, and trying to sort of bring everyone in and make it feel representative and inclusive.
Yes, well, when you're looking at there's a lot of times when you look at the neurodivergent community, because let's face it, what they've been doing with Batman is they've been essentially telling you the same story over and over again with different actors, different directors. But when you're starting to include a Batman with more neurodivergent characteristics, again, just that brain that I showed you, our brain are just completely different in how we look at things and how we try to see the world. And what you're going to find from a school setting is kindergarten through college. We're horrible because you're dealing with the back part of the brain, and we got nothing going on back there. We walk into grad school day one. And for those of you who've been to grad school, it's incredibly specific, very deep. You move very fast. That's this part of the brain. We have 2.5 times their neuroactivity, and it's incredibly unfair.
Oh.
All right. So when we're discussing things with a neurodivergent population, Batman is an excellent character because he's just so complicated. But what you have to find with a neurodiverse student is not pick something big in general. You got to find the specific point they're really interested in. And then these kids go really deep following that process that I gave you. And you're opening this up to a very deep conversation on that very specific point. And it's completely different than the general population that likes talking about big, high-level things. And the dyslexic and neurodiverse community is just the exact opposite.
Definitely. And, with representation, would you say that subtextual representation is enough, or would you say it should be explicit?
Really, it comes down to what the individual dyslexic is looking at. Because I said each one is going to look at it from a very specific point. I would give them the options of both and figure out which way they really want to go. But you're looking at an incredibly detailed point. So let's just kind of walk this through what it's like working with a neurodivergent person who's interested in comics. When you're looking at Batman, what part of his life are you the most fascinated about? What very specific part?
I'd probably say his the most specific part. Probably the transformation from Bruce Wayne to Batman.
Okay. Now let's get more specific. Why are you interested in that so much?
Because it shows one's struggles and the rise and trying to overcome everything has been dealt. That's what brings in the viewer.
Why is that important?
I think it's why is that important actually. I think it kind of shows like struggles can be overcome.
Why is that important?
Alex, you want to take this?
Well, wait, do you see what I was doing? This is important for you to understand.
Yeah.
You see how I asked you a question and you answered that I turned it into a question?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you see how you kind of went off the rails?
Yeah.
Okay, when you're dealing with a neurodiverse kid, they're going to be able to do that for much longer, typically. Okay, and when they start going off the rails, that's where you go back to your last good answer.
Oh.
Okay, that's your specific point on what the hero wants to do. Then you find that the most important word there. You find that's your base universal theme. Then you go into the thesaurus, look at 5 words, 10 words, the whole level, multiple levels. Type out each word, type out the definition you pick from Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, and then pick the one that best represents what's in your head. Pick your optimum villain that would prevent the hero from Batman from doing what he wants to do just before you went off the rails. Person or a concept. Generally, what you're going to find is you get more advanced, you use concepts, and then you put into a basic sentence, go because, and give me 3 really good reasons. That's the starting point where a neurodiverse student will start discussing this very deeply.
Oh, wow. Wow, that just blew my mind, that.
See when you start bringing in these neurodiverse, like let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I had people ask me, how powerful is this if we actually applied this?
Yeah.
I can never tell because my clients want privacy. Last December 27th, a little year and a day ago, I met Kimberly, homeschooling mom. Her son Reed was in 5th grade, 10 years old. Just had she just spent $700 to have the state of Ohio test her kids. He was reading at the 11th percentile, writing at the 4th percentile. He was interested in Wolverine. So we got graphic novels on Wolverine.
Yeah.
5.5 months later, he was reading at the 64th percentile, writing at the 65th percentile.
Wow.
His friends wanted him back in school, public school, for social reasons. Instead of going into special ed, he went into normal classes. He's getting A's and B's.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because his mom taught him 7 times faster at only an hour and a half a week, 36 hours total, generally. And she solved it. That's how powerful this is, and he used Wolverine to overcome this. And a mom did it, she's not a trained teacher, she's a mom. So that's how powerful that process is.
So how exactly did she use Wolverine to sort of teach and bring him up to that level with kind of going the same pace as everyone else, but getting there faster?
Well, she essentially, after we came up with the 3 good reasons, we turned each reason into a universal thing. Then he'd go to the graphic novel and find a quote.
Yeah.
And then we would ask him, okay, you got your quote. Now answer who, what, when, where, how, why. Put it into a mess. And then ask, does it sound generally correct? No. Keep doing it until it sounds generally correct. She would correct the spelling and grammar as she went. And they practiced that for 5.5 months. And he's above average in reading and writing using a graphic novel or graphic novels. He went through a couple of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And because when you're dealing with dyslexics and neurodiverse, if they're not interested, their motivation drops between 50 and 90%. Most of them 75 to 90%. The intervention's not going to work. We are academic specialists, not generalists. All right, so you got a kid interested in comics. What drives me nuts is if they, pick something like Harry from Harry Potter. Okay, I mean, this is not a complicated character. Okay, it's really not that complicated. Batman's complicated. Superman, well, not really. Okay, in comparison, all right? I want the complicated ones. When I'm teaching the kids, I recommend Batman a lot because the guy really, I have seen grown men with PhDs still peeling the onion on Batman 20 years into it.
Yeah.
All right. And they're still coming up with new ideas to explore his incredibly complex character. So that's what I recommend to the kids. But that's how powerful this stuff is. So when you start having the character represent the neurodiverse community, you just opened up a whole new canvas onto what you can explore online. Because let's face it, the Batman movies have just been, again, the same character with the same storyline, doing the same things. And this last one that just came out, this looks more interesting to me.
Yeah.
So that I'm looking forward to the next one coming out.
Oh, for sure, yeah. This one has definitely been looking at things a bit differently, and I think even they've been making Batman a bit more neurodivergent, apparently, from what I've been reading.
Just look at what they did with the last Superman movies, with the guy who they just got rid of. He's like, me Superman, me break things, me do standard things from 1950s,
Yeah.
And now they got the new guy, and it's much more. They're questioning things much more deeply, and that movie did so much better that one actually made money. The other ones lost.
They did. Yes.
So so this new direction they're going with things is definitely keeping things at a much more interesting level.
Yes, and it is interesting, and I think definitely worth for the viewers listening in and watching to remember that not everyone processes stories the same way, and I think that's what makes each person incredible. But now let's talk about our next topic here on the agenda, and let's look at the DCEU tragedy. Let's talk about what should have been Batman's triumphant return. Joe, Ben Affleck debuted as Batman in 2016 and it all fell apart. What's your thoughts on the tragedy of the Batfleck?
Well, I think it was more of a case of I didn't think it was a bad cast choice for Batman. It was just poorly written. I feel like it just felt like one big money grab. Felt like they tried to do. I feel like it just felt very rushed. I think both the movies he was in, it just felt like one big rushed idea. It's just like, let's give everything we know from the comics into one film and just hope it works. Hope the fans like it. And it just didn't feel thought through. It wasn't written properly. It felt, in particular, the Batman vs Superman, it just felt they were just jumping from action scene to action scene without any real explanation. And some of the cast choices, especially that Lex Luthor, I thought it was diabolical cast choice. It didn't feel like a villain. It felt like high school kids lost the plot. It just didn't work. So I think Ben Affleck would have made a good Batman in a better written film. So it just didn't. It felt far too neon comical. Didn't feel like it was written well at all.
Yeah, trying to make everything edgy.
Yeah, Brock Pattinson's Batman, I felt after that it was written a bit better. There's still some elements which I wasn't too sure about, which I won't say was as good as Dark Knight. But it felt a significant improvement on the Ben Affleck Batmans.
Definitely. And yeah, like I said, that edgy feeling that they tried to incorporate from the Dark Knight trilogy sort of ended up ruining the Batfleck era, as they weren't looking at what exactly made the Dark Knight work. And they just went with, oh, this is gritty, this is edgy, let's use this. But no, it's about associating with the viewers, representing the viewers, what do they want to see. And because they didn't do that correctly, that's where it started to fall apart. I do feel that the collapse came from the chaos of when Whedon took over, and it kind of just didn't capture the vision that was trying to be there, and just ended up just collapsing on itself. And I think it is a shame. It is a shame about what happened, and I feel that fans are saying that Affleck's solo Batman movie could have been interesting if they tried to actually have a real go at making Batman.
It was at least something that was kind of a highlight to actually watch, getting to see a live-action Batman with live-action superheroes working as a live-action Justice League, and I think that's just one thing that I've just got to give the Ben Affleck Batman over any other kind that I feel like people might sleep too much on sometimes and maybe might skip over.
Definitely. And I feel that while the DCEU crumbled, they did give rise to something new, where Matt Reeves ended up crafting something different, which brings us to our topic on TheBatman, the latest Batman movie that hit cinemas a few years ago, where it brought the horror back to Gotham. So, Alex, what's your thoughts on TheBatman?
I really did like it. It makes it kind of makes itself like its own kind of thing. It's not just the same old that we do with Batman. It wasn't big, it wasn't flashy, there wasn't like massive explosions. It was kind of like, it had the detective noir kind of theme to it. Like, it had the gritty kind of undertones. It kind of made Batman also look more like he was just an ordinary person that wasn't carried by like an equipment belt that almost had like everything with him. It just felt like he was just a very, well, like a tactical kind of guy who knows the kind of thing that he's looking into. Like, he doesn't have like a Batmobile that's essentially like an armored tank. He basically just has a hot rod that's been modified to be the Batmobile. And that gave us some really nice scenes like the chase with Cobblepot.
Mhm.
And just the whole look as well, like how the body, the mask, they just kind of stand out on their own. Just like the emblem being made of the gun that supposedly killed Bruce Wayne's parents. Like I just love the idea of him making that the logo. Like, this is who he is. This is where he's come from. This is why Batman's here, because of that one tragic night, and it holds so close to his heart. It's literally his emblem. But also the mask as well, the fact that it looks like it's handcrafted, stitched, and the reincorporation of the black makeup on the eyes. Because we see Pattinson, when he takes the mask off, he's looking kind of disheveled, and he's got the black rings around his eyes. Kind of like taking things from the old Batman stuff that kind of work, or at least filling, the blanks with like any revealing eye holes, and actually making it seem much more mysterious, but also keeping up with the Batman IP, that this is how Batman's kind of meant to look. But there's just so much I could really go into about why I like it, but I think I'll cut myself short and just say I think it was a great, refreshing take on Batman, where it delivered something new, but also keeping what we'd expect for Batman, but also its storytelling as well. It didn't just make it another flashy action film, it made it kind of like a deep dive as well, where you got to experience so many things at once that most Batman films don't really dive too much into, such as either character development, giving Gotham the actual atmosphere as if it were a character itself, and also getting to see how some supervillains themselves aren't just one-note characters, how they can actually be just as deep and as worth an analysis as Batman himself can be.
For sure. And as Matt Reeves definitely gave us a wonderful direction in 2022 and delivered proof that Batman works as detective noir horror, which really allowed the elements and aspects of Batman to come back to life and come back on the main screens again. Well, Russell, let's connect what we were mentioning before about neurodivergence to Pattinson's Batman. And what's your thoughts on the new Batman movie? And do you feel that it delivered with accessibility, and just what your overall feelings on the new Batman movie?
Yes, I would say that they really did a much better job exploring the complexity of Batman's character. What I really enjoyed about that movie in comparison to the earlier versions, because I can remember around that long, I can remember watching these Batman movies in the in the 90s, is they always just seem to be really too masculine. I would just literally call it the 1950s masculine superheroes from the earlier versions. And they were just too simplistic in the older versions of his willing to sacrifice and do anything to accomplish what he was looking at. And what I really liked about this newer version was just the more subtle complexities of how he's trying to solve things, how he's trying to go around and to find different solutions to overcome the problems he's facing. And what I think really represented this is, if you look closely at the movie, which I actually went back and watched a few times to come up, a few different scenes when I actually bought it after it came out, on Amazon. And what I found is, you just look at how he's trying to solve things, but he's kind of going about it in a rather chaotic way. It's not a linear line that you would expect from the previous versions. There's quite a bit of chaos there, where he's confronted with things at different points, and it's not a straight line solution. And that's neurodiverse people, how we overcome things. It is definitely not a straight line. We bounce all over the place. And I think that this character represented it, the movie that came out a couple of years ago, how neurodiverse people go about solving issues.
True, and it did have Pattinson Batman have a hyper focus on detective works to the exclusion of all else, and how like routine and pattern based thinking, and just the way his mind worked, and it really showed a different aspect to Batman than like other media that has portrayed.
Yeah, as I said, you look at the other characters, they always went in straight line solutions. I mean, it quite frankly, like let me give you an example. I just recently went and saw the new Avatar that came out, Catching Fire, and I was like, I already know what they're going to do. I know what they're going to say, why they're going to do it, and I really just put these headphones in and started listening to an audiobook. I think I did that for about 45 minutes throughout the movie because it was just so darn predictable.
Yeah.
Right. So when the Batman that came out a couple of years ago, I didn't have that. I could see where they were trying to go, but it wasn't so darn predictable like all the other ones were. So the focus on being a detective, the exclusion of everything else, that is so like a neurodivergent person. We are so focused on what we're trying to accomplish, but we go about it not in direct line. We kind of just bounce over the place. And while it wasn't a perfect representation of how we actually do things, it was a much better representation than the other ones. It made it a lot more interesting. I would have to say for the next one, what I'd recommend that they come out with is to focus more on the messiness of trying to solve complex things. And I think that would open up a lot more interesting storylines. But the problem is 80+% of the population isn't neurodiverse, and they might kind of miss that if they push that too hard.
That is true. But I definitely feel that if they go that direction, it could really open up people's minds. Even if they aren't neurodivergent, it could really represent and show people how each mind works, and sort of what makes neurodivergent viewers and readers different, but also kind of what makes it all interesting.
What you're going to find is if they explore that more in the sloppiness of how they come up with things. All right, like for example, when I was looking to come up with ways to help dyslexic students write better body paragraphs, I was working with the advanced artificial intelligence ChatGPT Pro, the PhD model. And I'm running it through and I'm asking, how would we connect these different ideas from a book called The Craft of Research, which is designed for PhDs writing their dissertations, over 1 million copies sold in the last 30 years. And I'm like, this is stupid. It gave me ideas to go after. Then I finally looked at it and said, what's this thing called a warrant? It connects the topic sentence with the facts, which I do use 2 quotes. And you answer how and why questions. I said, okay, let's start doing that. Well, university professors would go, oh, the kid's using a warrant. And it's automatically at the college level. And almost no teachers or any AP English kids have any idea what that is. That was the big secret to jump their ability to write much more evolved structural programs, body paragraphs. So it's a very sloppy way of just shooting around trying to find things. And I would recommend if they could add more of that into the next movie, it would make it a lot more interesting, because let's just face it, every time we look at superhero movies, we're finding that they're just so darn predictable. All right. Marvel did a great job going through Thanos, the last one, but then they started getting a lot more predictable, this decade. Okay, they just haven't been able to recapture that magic of doing 20 different, all these character developments over 15, 20 movies or so. So if they could, in this case, if they could just do more of the messy thought process and where that would take the character in more interesting ways, I think you'd have a far more interesting film.
For sure. And I do agree that movies should kind of start taking a look at not making it too predictable, and sort of having that aspect of that neurodivergence and not just having it be just straight cut and here's your generated movie, take it and come back for the next one next year. It's pretty much
I think that would actually work really well for Batman as well, because when you put it in words like that, it's making me think like how I used to play like the Batman games, like, you know, Arkham Asylum, Arkham City. Like, it's like a little bit of chaos in it, that it's not just, you know, Batman's just going to come in, he's going to beat up the bad guys, he's going to save the day.
Yeah.
I kind of would like to see a little bit of that thrown in, where, you know, you think you've got like the right idea of how something could happen based on how that perspective of it can be done, and I would like to see Batman have an idea kind of how something is to be done, but then kind of have it maybe fall apart, maybe run into a few hiccups, because I feel like that would actually freshen up the live action formula for Batman as well, because in most cases when we've seen things like this, like when the Joker comes in The Dark Knight just to, you know, apprehend Harvey Dent at the party, we just see Bruce Wayne essentially go full Batman mode, like he's in complete control even if he doesn't have his suit on. I would kind of like to see more situations like that, like everything's falling down around him and he's kind of just got to think how he's doing what he needs to do in the situation to get the best results possible, even if it means that some people might end up, I guess, technically not making it out 100% as well as they could be, because I think that's probably how too many superhero films are kind of done, where even if there's a bit of a downside to come, in most cases it almost happens like no one gets injured or everything goes according to plan, aside from maybe trying to like maintain damage that's done. I just kind of like to see Batman just thrown into like a bit of an inferno, because I feel like that would kind of really shine to how you can actually take this character that's always seems to have everything under control, everything in his belt, everything in his mind planned out perfectly to the nail, and just have it just completely fall apart midway, and a little more open interpretation for how things are done. I do feel like that would make Batman probably a lot more interesting to see on screen, knowing that even he's not perfect. Even what he deems the best option to do in this situation is still, by anyone else's accounts, stupid, unpredictable, and could actually be quite reckless.
That is true. Joe, what's your thoughts on what we've been discussing so far?
Well, for me, there's positives and negatives to that new Batman movie. I loved, you know, the way they made it darker. I liked the fact it was not just a pure action movie like other superhero movies, as you said. I liked the fact of a lot of it felt more mystery. It felt more like at times of questioning, like, is this meant to be a superhero movie or a Sherlock Holmes movie?
True.
But I like the mystery surrounding it as well, and also adding the odd action scene in here and there. I love what they did with the Riddler. They made him much darker, much better than Jim Carrey's version, which felt like, am I watching an actual superhero villain here, or just a comedian on a bad day? But so these are things I like. Well, I love the suit as well. I liked the fact it made it more high tech, made it seem more powerful. What I didn't like though is it felt like they tried to do too many villains in one film. I felt like, was Penguin really needed in that film? I didn't like the way he was portrayed in that particular film. There's nothing Penguin-like about him. I saw in the TV series Penguin, he seemed like a good mob boss. I liked the way he was portrayed in that. But there's nothing Penguin-like about him. There was also a question, was Falcone needed in that film? Catwoman, I didn't like the way she was portrayed. I preferred Michelle. Yeah, I preferred Michelle Pfeiffer's version. Where with Michelle Pfeiffer's version, you would constantly question, is she a villain or is she a friend? You didn't know which side she was on, something mysterious about her, whereas this Catwoman you knew from the get-go she was on Batman's side. So I'm not sure, I didn't like how she was incorporated in that. And also Andy Serkis as Alfred I didn't think was a good cast choice. There's nothing but like about him. Not like Michael Caine. So, yeah, there's a few things about that film I didn't like, but I did like what they did with the Riddler and the whole mystery surrounding it, and the fact they made it darker. But there's some other characters which I think they could have done better. They didn't need as many as they did.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, 'cause I feel like that Catwoman's that is Catwoman for the recent Batman movie did an amazing job, and they had to show the origins of Catwoman in a different way, which I think was really interesting. So I feel like a lot of people did enjoy. I probably forgot the actress's name right now. It's slipping my mind. No, I can't remember the recent actress's name. But I do know that I
I think
was enjoying.
both of the actresses, you know, I think the actress did a good job. She didn't like the way the character was written.
I mean, that is fair enough. But, you know, would you say that this Batman stands out among Batman adaptations?
I feel like I won't say it's the best Batman I've ever seen. I won't say it's definitely not the worst, but I won't go as far as say it was the best. I felt like it's middle of the road for me.
No.
It felt like it was too overthought, especially with all these additional characters in which I didn't think they needed.
Mm.
And certain cast choices didn't work for me.
Yeah, I get that. I feel that for everyone has a different idea of what Batman should be, and certain characters are not everyone's cup of tea. But I mean, at the end of the day, I guess that's what connects people, those differences in views and whatnot. Like for me, I feel that that latest Batman movie nailed stuff better than I've seen from other Batman adaptations. Of course, nothing beats the Dark Knight trilogy, but that's a separate thing. But I think if we jump onto our next topic, then let's look a bit on the TV side of Batman, where we had from 2014 to 2019, Fox gave us Gotham, and it was absolutely bonkers. And I think this was Batman's answer to what we saw in Smallville decades prior. So in this one, we had that when Gotham premiered in 2014, the general consensus was that it will be Batman's answer to Smallville, an origin series that took Bruce Wayne from young orphan to Caped Crusader. Like Smallville, it faced the challenge: if Clark Kent met all his hopes before he was Superman, at least he wasn't 10 and he had his powers. Here, Bruce was only 12 years old, meeting villains who'd be elderly by the time he became Batman. But it did make things interesting, as what would a child Bruce Wayne do in a world with like Riddler and Penguin and so on. So it's very interesting process that they went through here, and they're very different adaptation to what we saw in movies and whatnot. And I think that Gotham's greatest strength was embracing the chaos. It went full camp, full noir, full gothic horror, and sometimes all in one episode, where the horror elements were generally effective too. We had scarecrow episodes, we had the course of our storylines, and we had the body horror with characters like Clayface. So I think it's for a TV show, it really stood out. And if no one's seen it, I would recommend checking out that TV series, as it is a different and very unique approach to the Batman legacy. But here's the thing: Gotham had legitimate horror DNA throughout. The show explored different psychological horror, and we had City descending into madness vibe with pure gothic horror. But I feel like critics argue the show fundamental mishandling of the original themes, and they had Bruce Wayne's murder, Bruce Wayne's parents' murder. So they actually took a look at that in the series as well, where it wasn't really a random act of violence, and they where they went with it. I'm not going to spoil it, but should definitely be watched for sure. But let's get back to Batman Part 2 then. Alex, what do you feel is happening with the sequel and the future of the direction of the Batman?
Well, for starters, we've not got too much of it so far, which I think is a positive thing that they haven't just decided to rush into giving us it as soon as it came out. So it seems like at least a little bit of time and effective planning is going into making this sequel, because if it's been given such high praise and also high criticism as well, so that they know what to fix to make the sequel much more appealing to a wider generation of people and of people of different mindsets, different views and such, I feel like that's at least a positive to keep in mind. But I do think it's also got a lot of great potential to come as well, because when we see about all the projects that have been going on in the background, at least in Batman media itself, and anything linking to the universe, like the Cobblepot show, I do feel like it's at least expanding the world, giving us a little bit of a taste of what's to come, whilst also then being able to hide what they're trying to do for the most part, so that everything comes to us with very little idea of what we're going to get, and hopefully carry on with the same kind of themes that we got in the first film. And it will hopefully continue this Batman for what I'm actually hoping is going to be just as great as a run as the Dark Knight trilogy, where maybe we might only get like 3 films. We might even have like a mini Batman universe, kind of like a DCEU of itself. And hopefully it'll be worth the wait, worth the while, and I'm honestly really excited for it, especially if we get to see even half of what we saw in that first film, where we see Batman as not, again, like I said before, not just like someone who's always in control, someone who's a bit reckless and doing the best he can in the situation he has, but it's really something that I feel like is actually revitalizing and also keeping the love for Batman going, even in times where we're not at the moment getting too much Batman content compared to, say, like around the time of the Dark Knight trilogy, or post the Dark Knight trilogy, where I feel like that was like Batman's big hype, at least regarding the newer generation of fans from the early 2000s onwards.
For sure. And I think one thing that I find interesting about the direction of this Batman and the future of it is that it's kind of doing spin-off series. So apparently they did a Penguin HBO series, which sort of bridged the films, looking at the Penguin from the Batman movie. And apparently we've got multiple spin-offs in development. So I've seen we're getting Clayface, though that is from James Gunn, so I guess I wouldn't exactly say that's along the same universe. But we've also got something called the Batman Epic Crime Saga. So that should be interesting, and I think we're going to start seeing different villains. One that I've seen, which I'm really interested in, is that we might be seeing Professor Pig show up.
Oh, yeah. That's the one that I really think has been very underwhelmed in Batman media. Like, up until Arkham Knight came out, I didn't even know who Professor Pig was. And when you see the horrific things he did in that game alone, even though he wasn't a main character or like a main villain, he's grossly overdue for at least some form of proper debut. Aside from, I think he appeared on Beware the Batman. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't think I can actually name any other thing aside from the game and that show that he's appeared in, outside of the original kind of media. So that would actually be really interesting to see someone like him in it.
Oh, for sure. And I think we have definitely potential for deeper horror exploration in the sequel, especially if we're getting these different villains. So I'm very excited about that. But keeping on Batman future, let's look at the James Gunn side. I've just already mentioned the Clayface movie coming out next year, which should be interesting. And we also have that James Gunn is preparing another Batman for the DCU. So, Alex, what have you looked into and what's your thoughts on the DCU future of Batman?
I think it's in great hands, especially because we've got James Gunn because it's clear James Gunn, regardless if he's working for DC, Marvel, or even if he decides at one time or another he's going to just try and do his own thing, I feel like if he's passionate about something, and it's clear he's very passionate about what he's been doing recently and plans for the future, it seems like he wants to do what's appealing to him, but mostly it seems like he also wants to do what's most appealing to the fans, because, well, he is a fan himself. He's just trying to essentially give us what we kind of want, and despite obviously things going on in the background, with Warner Brothers and that,
Yes.
I do think that the future is still looking bright as long as we've got people like him under control of the projects being done, and hopefully with little to no interference in that,
Yeah.
because there's no point in breaking something that clearly isn't broken. We're going to get the goods from someone who truly cares. But I have seen some people also posting things related to how James Gunn is doing Batman, and for the most part, I agree with a lot of things that I've seen so far, just like the idea of James Gunn's essential revamp of Batman, where I think I saw something about him saying about the incorporation of color again, rather than just, the black and grey aesthetic, which I do actually think will work really well if, again, handled correctly, because there's been a lot of great Batman media out there where he's been a bit more colourful, like The Brave and the Bold, as that was probably like one of my biggest Batman highlights outside of main live-action Batman media, and I loved it. I loved the blue look on him there, and I've seen concept art of how I think James Gunn kind of visualizes him doing Batman, and I can't say I agree 100% with it, but it does actually appeal to, well, how I saw Batman in the past, and I'm in complete support for any changes like that being done, because Batman, I don't think, is just defined by, obviously, the tone of his suit or how his suit necessarily looks. As long as it's capable of striking fear and looking iconic on its own, that you don't just think of it as a rip-off of previous outfits, I do feel like at least Batman's always going to be throwing in, presence in media, and he'll always have various different ways of looking both iconic, scary, and daunting at the same time. So, ultimately, I feel like, at least for how things are going for him in the future, so far, everything, ironically, for The Dark Knight, things are looking very bright.
Oh, for sure. And Russell, do you have any thoughts on the future direction of Batman with both Matt Reeves' Batman, but also do you think James Gunn could bring in that accessibility that that challenge that you're looking for in these movies?
Well, I think that they're going in a better direction, because let's just look at what DC was finding. It wasn't working. All right. So with the new direction that they took the most recent Superman movie, it just completely changed it.
Yeah.
All right. I still have my criticisms about some things they could have done better, but they put out a clearly much better movie. And I think that especially your comments about the last movie being too busy, too much stuff trying to get on in too little space, and not really allowing Batman's character to be fully developed. I think that they're recognizing that. I think what you're going to find when they come out with the next movie, it's probably going to be simpler, and I'm hoping it's going to be more focused on the intricacies of Batman being neurodiverse, and literally just trying to focus more on some of the aspects of being neurodiverse, of how he goes about investigating things, how he feels about when he hits obstacles, because that's one of the major things I don't think they really did really well in the last movie. When a neurodiverse person runs into obstacles, you tend to have two general ways that they respond to it. They either become really motivated and they just plow through everything, or they become more shattered as a person. And I think if they gave over the next couple of movies an example of both of those, you would find it far more interesting as a character.
For sure. And I hope that they do go the route and really open up and help people understand this aspect, and really kind of just enriching the Batman experience, really. But I think as we're starting to draw to a close here, let's jump into our festive rapid fire round. So I will give a hot take, and I want each guest to respond in turn. So let's go for our first take then. Batman Returns is a Christmas movie. Alex, what's your
Yes.
I'm going to go with yes, just for the genuine consensus. I actually can't really deny it, but I'm just going for kind of like when I think of that film and other films where people ask the same question, like Die Hard and Nightmare Before Christmas. I'm just thinking, look, if you want it to be a Christmas film, if it's got the Christmas aesthetic going for it, then by all means, you can call it a Christmas film. You can call it whatever you want. So I'm just going to say, yes, it is a Christmas film. And if anyone doesn't agree with me, that's your opinion. That's my opinion. Let's just enjoy what we like. But it is definitely a Christmas film.
Yeah, anyone who does, it's definitely a Christmas film. Well, it's a film set at Christmas. It's a Christmas film.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, don't care what
Yeah,
anyone
I
else
would
says.
generally
Christmas
agree
film.
it's a Christmas. Yeah, the background of it, what they're trying to say, the scenery. Yeah, it was a Christmas film. Or if you want to be more politically correct, a holiday film.
Oh, yeah, definitely holiday.
Touche.
All right, this is a fun one. The Batman is better than any Dark Knight trilogy film.
No,
Joe, let's get your reaction.
no, Dark Knight trilogy. You're not going to top that. I feel like The Dark Knight's for me greatest film, my favorite film ever. May say it's. I know people who said it's the greatest film ever. And even Batman Begins, I love what they did with Batman and showing how he came, turning from Bruce Wayne to Batman. Dark Knight Rises, yeah, not as strong as the other two, but I love the way they brought everything to a close, tied up the loose ends. Whereas the only part of the Batman movie that I'd say was better than If Something Dark Knight Rises was the Riddler. And Riddler would fit in with the Dark Knight trilogy really well. I'd have taken that Riddler over Bane. That's the only part I'd take. Yeah, Riddler over Bane. But anyone else, no.
Yeah. Alex, what about you?
I actually can't answer that one because there's so many things that the Batman does that is better than what the Dark Knight trilogy do. Like, I feel like certain characters' developments, or at least like if we took this one as like the basis of the start of Batman. Granted, we don't see him eventually become Batman like we do see him become Batman in Batman Begins, but for like a marker, I would say the Batman does a better job introducing you to the world of Gotham City and to people there at the time, and key characters like Carmine Falcone, Catwoman. It does a better job than that than I feel like some of them did for Batman Begins, although that one did really well with at least introducing Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins. But I just feel like the two very different kinds of films where I don't feel like one could be placed above the other because they're not really on the same one. Like, one's kind of like a full-on action trilogy, and the Batman, whilst it has its action shots, like, again, the chase with Cobblepot, it doesn't really, use it in the same way as the other films, so it's very hard for me to say it's better or worse than them. But if I had to give a definitive answer, I would stand by the Dark Knight trilogy over the Batman, but by only a very close margin. But obviously, we have to see how far the Batman goes in terms of a franchise timeline for me to be able then to say this universe and its films was better than this universe and its films. But as a whole, they're too different for me to really give a proper answer. But I'll just make it simple and just say Dark Knight trilogy over the Batman.
And Russel,
I would have to say, looking back at the original movies, we had Michael Keaton and Nicholas playing the Joker. You had such tremendous acting power, and the script was absolutely disgustingly, horribly bad. All right. What I find with the series that you're mentioning, The Dark Knight, I think overall they did a really good version of Batman. I think the actors were fantastic. I think that they portrayed it at a very deep level. The writing was so much better than the original ones from late '90s in late '80s and the '90s, because the writing for all of them was just so pathetic. I think the people were on drugs or something. So I like that. I think overall the Dark Knight. I like how they overall did that series. Just the quality of the writing, the quality of the acting. I think the portrayal was really good. Overall.
For sure. So let's go on to our next take then. Neurodivergent representation in comics should always be explicit. Russell?
Well, you know what? I don't think you have to be explicit about it. I think that's the problem that we have in a lot of films.
Yeah.
Is you kind of look at, let's say, like Steven Spielberg's dyslexic.
Yeah.
And when you look at movies like Saving Private Ryan, he just tells you how to feel. You cannot escape his vision. He grabs you and forces you to just watch things and to feel what he's trying to communicate. I think that the audiences today are much more sophisticated. So you don't have to be really explicit about it. You can kind of do things that are a little bit, just not shoving it in the audience face, hint at different things, and then kind of bring them together near the end. And I think that way, especially when you rewatch a movie, you get more out of it than the first time. Those are the best movies that I remember ever watching, directors that weren't explicit, but more hitting on the sides until eventually you can see how things come together.
All right. Interesting. Alex, any thoughts?
I have to agree with it as well. I feel like at least when you dive into these ones as well, you kind of also do the character a service as well by, again, not only to portray them in a different kind of mindset, but for like shooting films and such, or even TV series where you kind of have this mindset going in, I do feel like it just gives you a better experience of everything under the surface level of just what you're seeing. I feel like it just helps connect a bit more with the audience, especially if it's targeted at particular people who would actually enjoy this kind of stuff. And it's part of the reason I like certain films and games, because when you get this kind of character, or you get this kind of thing that's working for them, that you kind of pick up on, because it kind of fits in with how your mind is also perceiving it as well. I just feel like it just increases the ability to enjoy something, especially knowing that, not everyone's of the same mindset itself, and the idea that you're getting to see it directly in front of you, and it could be something that's aesthetically pleasing to you in that factor as well. I feel like that just makes it much more enjoyable just to watch and want to consider looking back on in the future as well. If it's a time where you just want to kill a few hours, or if it's because it's really something you enjoy, I just gotta say yes.
I definitely agree with that. Joe, any thoughts?
Well, for me, I do think they do well exploring this avenue. What I'd say is, I think it's all about storyline as a whole. Does it entertain me? Is it written well? Do I understand it? Yeah, I get the whole representation part, but I think Batman does it well in that they include it, but it's not pushed too much. Like I've seen other projects do when pushing whole representation too far. So that's what I'd say.
Fair enough. I mean, I think it should pretty much be explicit, but I do think there's some hints of what Joe mentioned, that trying to kind of go overboard with it is kind of what starts getting people be like, I don't know. And that kind of dissociates that. I think there needs to be a middle ground where it is shown and it is represented, but kind of not pushed or shoved too far, which we've seen with some different representations. So, let's go into our next take then. Batman works better as horror than traditional superhero story. Alex?
Oh, that's actually a hard one to think of because there are actually a lot of very scary and horrific themes in Batman. Whether you look at, say, the Joker and how he's killed people, because in some places you can actually see very gory images. Like there's even the whole case of where the Joker actually had his face removed, which is, well, as you brought up before with Gotham, as from what I understand, because I've not personally watched it, but I think he's called Jerome. He actually is like one variant of what the Joker's supposed to be in that show, and he had the similar thing done there. There's a lot of horrific themes in Batman as well, like what Joker did to Robin, and how he basically convinced him that Batman had moved on, he didn't care for him, and the physical and emotional abuse that certain characters do, and even body horror as well. Like when you look at, say, Dr. Kirk Langstrom, I think his name is, where he becomes Man-Bat. You know, you've got all these kind of themes here, but I feel like for the most part, unless, you're reading a particular story where that kind of thing's prioritized more over, say, the actual action or, just traditional hero kind of tones that you go for this kind of thing. I do feel like it's there, but it's overshadowed, but it's quite prominent depending on the story you're reading or, like, the source that it's being used from. But I'd probably say at least how Batman is for the most part. It does seem like it's more traditional action, or at least what you'd expect from a normal superhero film, but there are deep undertones of very disturbing and horrific stuff that I feel like, even if not everyone in the world has experienced it in one way or another, it's at least been replicated enough from, like, the most common kind that people would fear. Like, you could even say with the Joker, the fear of clowns with coulrophobia. That kind of stuff is actually really well present in Batman. It's just sometimes you don't see it directly because you're looking more at, again, the action thing rather than, like, the horror theme part of it. But I feel like that's just the charm of it because they both blend really well together, and that's what's given us Batman. But yeah, I would like to see a bit more horror kind of thing. Again, being a big horror fan myself. But yeah, Batman is for me, he's more action-esque than he is horror-esque, but obviously there are still a lot of potential to be done there. We've just got to see how future projects or even future comics and such like that are going to balance them, or if they're going to prioritize horror over action, just see what they come out with.
For sure. And I think definitely we've got a lot of, as you mentioned, the different aspects of Batman and the different Batman stories that where horror has been the main theme, and they have made Batman stand out. So yeah. But Joe, what about you?
No, for me, I'm someone who likes the darker Batmans. I like the horror aspects of it. I think we know he's a superhero, so the base of the story is action, superhero, Batman saving the day. I do like the horror aspects to it. I feel like it just makes everything more interesting. I would like it, where there's more in future Batmans where it's more intense scenes, more scenes where you're expecting jump scare. I prefer that to the whole neon, kiddie, childish versions that they did with, Ben Affleck, Val Kilmer, and George Clooney, which, in particular with the Val Kilmer, George Clooney ones, you know what I think of them, I don't think they were taking it seriously. It felt like they were specifically written for kids, those two films. Whereas the darker versions, you look at it and think, okay, is this appropriate to show your kids? Batman's something you can, something kids supposed to like, whereas certain things like Dark Knight Trilogy, you're looking at thinking, is this appropriate for your kids? So I think that's why they were trying to introduce with some of the Batman films. I personally prefer the dark ones, but I can understand why certain fans want to move away from the horror aspect, just make it more of action. so more kids could watch it, because that's where a lot of the fans would come from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I prefer the darker horror ones because I find them more entertaining and interesting.
I don't know. Mentioning like the going towards action like for the kids. I mean, we had Batman the Animated Series, which took a lot of aspects from the horror stuff, and that was, I mean, a lot of kids grew up with that. I grew up with that. I always sort of grew up watching the animated series, and that had a lot of horror aspect. So, I mean, I don't think just making action would just make it kid accessible, because, I mean, even horror would work. But Russell, do you have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, this is where you run into a basic conflict when they're thinking about how to make movies. When you're looking at who these movies are made for, they're made for 12 to 13-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Because they'll go, if they like it, see it 5-10 times. So I find that when you try to go into the darker, more horror aspects, it makes it far more interesting to adults, because you can deal with much more useful things. But if they end up making it too dark and push it into the R rating, they're going to just kill access to the unlimited 12, 13-year-olds coming, seeing it again and again and again. So I wish they would go into the more deeper, darker aspects. I specifically think it would be interesting if they explored more about how he became, when he was first exposed to Bat, and went into more detail in that area, especially from the horror aspect. I think that would make it far more interesting. But given the fact that they're making these for 12, 13-year-old boys, I just don't think it's going to happen.
True. All right, next take then. Ben Affleck deserved better from the DCEU. Joe?
Yeah, I didn't, like I said earlier, I didn't think he was a bad cast choice, but man, I think if the films were written better, if you put him in other films, like, for example, Taking Back in Time to when the Michael Keaton ones were good. Like, I'm going to disagree with Russell. I thought I agree with the later two of that era, the Val Kilmer and George Clooney ones. They were terrible, but I really like the Michael Keaton ones because that felt like a comic book brought to life. In those two, so I think Ben Affleck in those films would have been really good. So I feel like he's someone who'd make a good cast choice for Batman. And I think, and I get what they were trying to do in his movies in the 2010s, which make him like an older version of Batman, where he's more secure, more confident in himself. Like he's been doing this for a while, so he knows what he's doing. But I just think, like I said, poorly written films. Same with what's his name now? The one who plays Superman. You got to remind me. I can see his face. Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
Yeah, same with him. I thought good actor for Superman, but that Batman vs Superman film's poorly written. And the Justice League film, the one that was released in cinemas, I thought was atrocious. I thought Zack Snyder's 4-hour long version, if you sit down and watch that, that's pretty good. But I just felt the Batman vs Superman film, poorly written, Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill, I thought could have done a lot better. And I thought introducing, I didn't think Wonder Woman was needed in that film. I thought Lex Luthor, like I said, he looks like Bobby Beale from EastEnders.
Yeah.
He looks like a kid who's just been expelled and about to commit genocide. I just don't know what they were thinking. I thought they did much better job with Lex Luthor in the latest Superman film. That's the best Luthor I've seen. But
oh yeah, for sure. Nicholas Hoult smashed that for sure.
Yeah, that felt like a proper villain. Whereas the other one I just could not take seriously.
Fair enough.
But I thought in a better written film, he could have given praise as really good Batman in a better written film.
Oh yeah.
Like, he could have done one in that Robert Pattinson one. They switched roles, you get the same criticism. Ben Affleck would have been praised, but Robert Pattinson would have been getting a lot of stick.
Yeah, we'd end up like Twilight all over again. Russell, do you have
Yeah,
any?
well, when I was trying to say back with the original Batman with Michael Keaton, but really with Jack Nicklaus, you had one of the finest actors who ever lived. And the script that they were given, to me, it just wasn't done. The quality of the writing was atrocious, and they were able to save the movie, but they shouldn't have to been put in a position to save the movie. They should have spent the extra time to actually come up with a much better script. And as far as Affleck, I think he's again one of the finest actors that we ever had. And when you look back on Batman versus Superman, 1% chance that he could be evil. We now need to destroy him. It's like, who came up with this? Were you guys on crack or something? If they were given such a phenomenal actor that if the problem with Hollywood, and they do this all the freaking time, they don't sit around and wait until the script's done because they have to get certain things made at certain times. So they drop 100, 200 million bucks making these movies when the script is the cheapest part of the entire process. And if they just spent a bit more time and actually got writers who knew how to write better, you would have far better movies. I mean, literally, there are times when you spend more on catering on a movie than you do on the script.
Oh.
That's the absurd portion of what's going on. So that's my criticism. Spend more time, get the better writers, come out with a really good classic 3-act Shakespearean script, and we would have far better movies.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, they need to really iron out those scripts and just, like you said, take a bit longer and just look at what exactly they're trying to deliver. Otherwise, it falls apart. Alex, what's your verdict?
Oh yeah, definitely. Ben Affleck, obviously a lot of passion was lost with this guy. He deserves so much better. He was essentially like the culmination of, say, Batman animated and the Arkham series Batman, and just, comic accurate looking at him Batman, at least, in terms of like body texture and how, buff Batman actually is, but simplistic looking. So much potential, so much love poured in where you think this is like a Batman for every type of media that we can all get behind. And yeah, just like what Russell said before, just poor writing, just really bad handling of films. And I feel like eventually they had something and they completely lost it. And when they even tried to make any kind of, resurgence, like I guess you could say with the Snyder Cut from Justice League, too many of us were already given up at that point now. Like, personally for me, I feel like it might have been Batman and v Superman for me, because I actually did fall asleep during that film when I first saw it, and I've only seen it the one time. I was tired that day as well, if I can remember right, and that's the whole reason I fell asleep more than anything. But yeah, I just could not engage with the film properly. I did like the looks of the characters, I just couldn't engage with them. Like, say, when you first see Christian Bale don the armor and all that for Batman, just it wasn't the same. There wasn't as much magical love there, and I feel like it's just something we'll look back on as thinking, great Batman, just poor execution of character, film, plot. It was just completely, it was dead before it started, basically. That's all I'll just say for that. But who knows? There's probably a universe where Ben Affleck was the best Batman, but unfortunately we're not living in that universe.
No,
we're not even living close to that universe.
No, sir. And yeah, Ben Affleck should have received well from the DCEU. And I think Batman vs Superman is probably one of the few superhero movies where I actually decided to pirate it because I heard how bad it was. I'm like, I'm not spending a single dime on this movie. It's not getting any of my money.
I will say as well, it's not like, Ben Affleck's fault of, like, I know every actor's, kind of got like their controversial, like their pros and cons for why they should be right or wrong for a role. I don't personally think he was wrong for the role in that. I mean, considering all the people who've been involved in the DCEU, especially Jared Leto, he's not even, that bad. If anything, I think he was actually perfect for both Bruce Wayne and Batman. He fits both roles really well, just like Christian Bale did. It's just Oh, they really did him dirty, and I feel like after,
100%.
you know, you do something that bad and you don't actually try to make up for it, as well as say most people in say a video game industry will try to make up for a bad entry with a better entry.
Yeah.
You know, you've kind of lost your audience there. There's nothing we can do. No one's really gonna want to see this again. And I feel like that's the true travesty of that. Just it was a Batman that had great potential that died before any love could really set in for him.
Yeah, I agree. And even though I pirated those movies, I still got upset for like a wasted gigabytes of internet just even downloading this thing.
Yeah, even though you try to avoid losing, you're still lost in the end of the day.
Exactly. But let's go on to our next take then. Comics are more accessible than books for dyslexic readers. Russell?
I think that they are, because if you look at Professor James Collins' research, he wrote a book called Strategies for Struggling Writers, and he found 3 default writing strategies of copying, visualization, and narrative. So you're looking at a standard book, it's just written in a narrative. There's no visualization to help to connect everything. So when you're looking at comics or graphic novels, what you find is that the pictures help out tremendously for neurodiverse people to understand what's going on. And that's one of the key things when it comes to helping dyslexics learn to read, is by seeing the pictures, having an understanding of what the author's trying to present with this. You're now using 2 of the 3 default ways that we learn instead of 1.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those points there. Alex, what's your take there?
I don't have the speciality like Russell does to make too much commentary on it, but I will go along with what he said, and I do agree, because even like you guys know that I have a large manga collection, and I also have a few comics here and there. I actually find that kind of material much more engaging than most ordinary written narrative books. Like I actually like looking at the pictures, not because necessarily I can't visualize it myself, but I always find these kind of books at least being much more engaging, and I'm much more willing to go back to them, kind of because the style itself sets in for me, and it just creates a better idea of getting across what the author is trying to make you want to see, rather than just, you know, creating your own kind of visualization that you might not even be doing itself a service for. So I'm just going to agree with what Russ also said and say, yes, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, I'm along those same lines. Joe, anything there?
Again, I wouldn't really know about this. Well, the only thing I can say is that, obviously, so for example, kids who can't read, you know, comic books would be easier because at least they can see what's going on and still have an understanding of the plot, whereas other books, for instance, for example, the Harry Potter books, with no pictures in that, so if you can't read, you have a clue, you've not seen the movie, you don't have a clue what's going on. Whereas with the comics, you can you might not be able to understand everything. Certain parts, like the dialogue, for instance, you might need to be able to read to understand, but at least you might have an understanding what's going on in the action scenes.
Fair enough, but yeah, definitely along Russell's lines there, and I think it is important to have that accessibility. Let's go on to our final take then. Robert Pattinson will be remembered as the definitive Batman. Alex?
Before I give my answer, can you give me an idea what you mean by definitive Batman? Do you mean like the most iconic kind of Batman, or like the most ideal Batman?
I guess we can go iconic. I mean, the take is given as definitive, just the definitive Batman, but I guess we can go iconic.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand what you meant by definitive first, just to make sure I'm not, giving a wrong answer. That's all. But I can kind of see him being the definitive Batman. Yes, there's a lot of things that work for him, a few things that don't. But obviously, we've only had one entry so far for him, so it is a bit hard to say. But comparing him to all the other Batmen as well, considering how well so many of them have been presented, it's kind of hard to tell because you've got the live action ones, but then you've also got the animated ones, the video game ones, and even the original comic book ones. But you know what? I think I'll actually go out of my comfort zone for this one. Say, you know what? Yes, I will say he is probably the most definitive Batman. Just I feel like he's also kind of like the most real life kind of Batman that we probably would get, where he feels like he's most of what made the old Batman films Batman so iconic to begin with, but not being like too over reliant on tech or having too high functioning tech to kind of help him carry out his duties, like say Christian Bale's was. So I'll say yes, I do think Pattinson is that Batman. Yes.
All right, Joe.
Well, so I disagree with Alex. Not for the first time.
I assume you will.
But in this case, for me, if you think of definitive Batman, it's one of three: Adam West, Michael Keaton, or Christian Bale. For me, like Christian Bale, if we're going by like as ideal, Christian Bale's best by far, in my opinion. And Michael Keaton was the first one to give Batman a more darker side to it. Thought his was done really well. And then Adam West was the original live action Batman. So for that, you can make a case for him being the definitive one. But if you ask me who's the definitive one, out of three, I'd say Christian Bale. Because when you think of Batman, think of good Batman movies, you initially think of Dark Knight trilogy. Who's in that? Christian Bale. So that's why I'm going to say he's the definitive Batman. Robert Pattinson, I thought he was decent, but he's not the best. I won't say he's definitive.
Russell, how about you? Do you think Robert Pattinson will be remembered?
Well, honestly, I'm from a different generation, so I'm going to tell you I think Michael Keaton was the best Batman. He just, I just think from what I was growing up reading the comics and the graphic novels, I think that he dealt with a truly pathetic, ridiculously horrible script, but just the little nuances of how he came across and the little inflections that he gave at different parts, I think just represent my best view of what Batman is.
Yeah. I like this here. This is where we get what everyone feels is as the best. We've got Michael Keaton from Russell here. We've got Christian Bale from Joe here, and we've got Alex with those mixed thoughts there. And I think for definitive, I don't know if he will be remembered as definitive. I think maybe for this generation, new generation could be definitive, as each generation does go through there. So we have Keaton generation saying Keaton, we got Christian Bale's generation saying Christian Bale. So who knows, maybe for this generation growing up, Robert Pattinson might be the definitive Batman for them. So it's very interesting on who people feel that which actor they feel they connect to. But I think we've traced Batman through horror, neurodivergence, tragedy, and triumph. So time for final thoughts on this holiday special. So, Alex?
I feel like at least Batman has had one really well-established evolution, because when you see how he's been taken from his original source material, which, as I said in the previous episode, is more than 80 years old now, so it's essentially like a full person's full life cycle so far. He's gone through many different iterations and changes, some good, some bad, some that have sparked severe debate, some that some people live up to being the most initial kind of components of Batman, some being ones that have obviously seen changes throughout the years. He's had a very long and well presented presence in media, both standalone and paired up with the rest of the DC universe. But I feel like Batman's one of those where I don't think he's going anywhere else anytime soon. He's always going to be very well presented in our society, and he's always going to be very popular for various degrees. And I feel like it's one of the good things that even if it's just the one character alone, he's been so beloved by so many different people over so many generations that every new generation is going to add something new to the character. He's always going to be developed in different ways, and whether or not we finally hit a Batman that absolutely everyone's ever going to love, both design-wise, character-wise, or theme-wise, Batman's ever-growing presence is not going anywhere anytime soon, and I feel like we'll probably still be thinking about this stuff when we ourselves are like 80, and we'll be thinking that it's been one massive ride and it's still to keep coming. So that's the last kind of thing I think of Batman. He's going to keep on living long after we're all at that point where, like his cycle so far, ours are over, his is still continuing, and that's definitely a blessing.
For sure. And pretty interesting to see where it does take us. But Russell, how about you? What's your final verdict here?
I think that Batman is going to stand the test of time because he's simply one of the most complex characters. Unlike Superman, which, let's face it, boring, okay, or the Green Lantern, they've done what they could with that, okay? He's just, you can see yourself into what he went through, what he's trying to do, and the different versions that people are portraying with him as you go through the generations. Okay. And I just think that the complexity and the accessibility is going to make him a character that's going to be with us for a very long time.
For sure. And yes, definitely that complexity will definitely keep people coming back. But Joe, how about you? What's your final thought there?
I think my final thoughts, I think on the whole, Batman's been a huge success for generations. It's still going to be around for generations to come. Obviously, some films have been better than others. I think for me, Dark Knight's going to be, that's the one to beat, that's the peak. I'm not sure if anything will beat that. Some have come close. I thought the Rob Pattinson Batman, they did some elements really well. Other people have done a bit better. I'm excited to see what Batman 2 will bring, whether it will bring in, whether it will build off from the Penguin series, whether it will build off from the Clayface movie, or it'll bring in, like we saw at the end of the last Batman, Joker appearing in the prison, or will they bring him as the main villain? I'm looking forward to seeing that, what else they do with him. But yeah, I think on the whole, Batman's been a success, bar one or two movies that were written badly. I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds.
For sure. And before I give you guys my perspective on Batman, I just want to say, for all of us Superman stans like myself, Superman is not boring. Superman has one
compared to Batman, I think he is, but just my opinion.
I think Superman has one of the biggest hearts, one of the biggest ideals, and what he fights for, it makes him stand out. And Superman really does have his own perspective and his own uniqueness, which kind of makes him a rival Batman in who do people look to for their superhero inspiration. But here's my perspective on Batman after the Dark Knight trilogy and why it matters this holiday season. Christopher Nolan gave us a Batman for the post-9/11 era, grounded, serious, reflective of our fears about terrorism and surveillance. But Batman is bigger than any single interpretation, and the post-Nolan era proves it. Ben Affleck's tragedy teaches us that even great gifts can be mishandled. His Batman was wrapped beautifully but delivered to the wrong address. The DCEU's chaos wasted a performance that deserved better circumstances. Matt Reeves' TheBatman is the holiday miracle we needed. Yes. And proof that Batman can be detective noir, psychological horror, and character study all at once. And the revelation that Pattinson's Bruce might be neurodivergent, that's representation that matters, whether subtextual or explicit. For viewers such as Russell, this matters because comics can be uniquely accessible to neurodivergent readers when done right. Batman's visual storytelling, his patterns of behavior, his hyper-focus, these resonate with readers who see themselves in the character. For some others, Batman matters because his horror DNA has never really left. We just forgot to nurture it, from Scarecrow's fear toxin to the Joker's chaos, from Burton's gothic fairy tale to Reeves' noir nightmare. Batman thrives when we embrace his darkness. The post-Nolan era is messy, frustrating, and still unfolding, but it's also given us multiple Batman existing simultaneously, each serving different audiences, each exploring different aspects of the character. And as there's a certain quote there, that's not a bug, it's a feature. This holiday season, as we gather with family and friends who experience the world differently than we do, maybe Batman's evolution reminds us that there's no single right way to be a hero. Whether you're neurodivergent, whether you connect with horror, whether you prefer grounded realism or gothic fantasy, there is a Batman out there for you. The greatest gift Batman gives us isn't definitive answers, it's endless possibilities. So thank you so much to my co-host Alex and our wonderful guests Russell and Joe for this comprehensive holiday journey through Batman's evolution. So thank you guys.
It's been great as always.
Cheers.
And I think from Detective Comics number 27 to the Batman Part 2, we have covered multiple decades of the Batman mythology, where Part 1 showed us how Nolan changed everything, and now Part 2, this episode here, showed us that everything can change again, and that's okay. Batman endures because he adapts, because he reflects what we need him to be in each era. Whether you're watching Batman Returns or reading Batman comics as a neurodivergent reader finding representation, experiencing Batman as gothic horror, or just waiting impatiently for the Batman Part 2, you are part of this legacy. And as we close out this holiday special, remember, Batman isn't just about fighting crime. It's about facing our fears, using our differences as strengths, and believing that one person, however different they might be, can make Gotham a little brighter. Until then, from all of us to all of you, happy holidays and have a wonderful new year. And remember, the night is always darkest before the dawn. For now, this is your Guardian signing off, wishing you all a great journey and to keep it tight. Excelsior!